This Saturday morning live stream is going to focus on what the Ravens did in 2022 against their toughest matchup, their most important matchup, if you ask me, the Cincinnati Bengals, in those 3 games that they played against each other. Of course, the Bengals won 2 of them, so credit to those guys for doing so. But I think the Ravens defense did an excellent job across all 3 games with maybe 2.5 different strategies utilized, I guess, that I'll try to encompass and describe to you here. I did one of these videos, to be honest with you, how the Ravens slowed down Joe Burrow. I did one of these after the wild card loss. This one is hopefully a more comprehensive look, or at least a more comprehensive attempt by me at what I consider to be 3 classic games played between the Ravens and Bengals in 2022. Even though the Week 18 game, clearly was not a one-score game, and the game was pretty much decided far earlier than the other 2. I thought that the Ravens really changed the dynamic in terms of dealing with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd in 2022, and they needed to, because in 2021 things went really bad. So just to recap and show a couple of plays here, for various reasons, some of which is injury, some of which is scheme, some of which I think is just poor decision-making in terms of the coverages by the coaches. 2021, Joe Burrow obviously was historic against the Ravens. Week 7, 23 completions for 416 yards, 3 TDs, 1 interception. Week 16, against a very compromised Ravens secondary, 37 for 46, 525, obviously, and 4 TDs. You total it up, you got a 71% completion percentage, 940-plus yards, and 7 TDs against 1 interception in 2 games. Clearly pretty unbelievable. That secondary in Cincinnati, the second game that you're seeing clips of here, was clearly compromised. One thing to note, though, is that the 525 yards, it wasn't really an anomaly for Joe Burrow, at least. As you see, a really weak pass interference call against Darryl Worley, who 2 years in a row has played a pretty good game against the Bengals, mind you, late in the season. The very next week after this one, Joe Burrow was 30 of 39 for 446 and 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs in a win. 4th straight game that year without a turnover for Joe Burrow, after he had committed, I think, 16 turnovers in the first 11 games. Why do I bring those numbers up? Well, Joe Burrow was rolling at the end of 2021. What he did to the Ravens wasn't anomalous. I mean, the huge number of passing yards, 525, was anomalous. But in terms of the progression of where he was, or the projection of where he was at the end of 2021, it's in line with what he was doing. He was in a groove, and the Ravens just showed no ability to adapt. Perhaps they couldn't have adapted anyway with all the injuries, mind you. I'm willing to accept that. But clearly in 2022, the Ravens did adapt. I'm going to focus on this game by game. All right, so a lot of Tampa 2 in week 2 from multiple alignments, meaning pre-snap, Ravens are making things look different and then essentially rolling to Tampa 2 often. And when I say often, I think they used the Tampa 2 12, 14, 15 times in that game. And it wasn't infallible, but it did cause Joe Burrow to work through one more read often, and then that would allow the pass rush to get there. I talked about this in a video about Marcus Williams, and maybe 3 weeks ago I did a video on Kyle Hamilton, trying to work my way through the whole roster as best I can, and I noticed a lot of things coverage-wise from the Week 5, Week 18, and the wildcard game in terms of the progression, the way the Ravens defended the Bengals, and Joe Burrow specifically. And a couple of things to note. That's the reason why I did this video. That's the impetus for me doing this video is noticing things with the coverages that I wanted to point out to people and wanted to put the information out. Maybe other people have dealt with it already. But a lot to me needs to be said about how many guys played a role in these 3 games. Kyle Hamilton didn't play much in this Week 15 game, I don't think. Pepe Williams did. I think Brandon Stevens did. Kyle Hamilton played a lot in Week 18 and then in the wildcard playoff game. Marcus Peters didn't play a down in the Week 18 game, but he played in the playoff game. What I'm getting at is, by the way, Josh Bynes had a sack in the Week 5 game. Didn't play a down. He was off the roster by Week 18, obviously, but still a part of the team, I know. My point is, there's multiple guys played a role. Multiple guys had an impact across these 3 games. Now, the Tampa 2 was a big part of it. It wasn't just used on third down, mind you, even though a lot of the plays you're going to see here are on third down. And granted, Burrow did complete 68% of his passes in this game. He was 24 of 35, but he only threw for 217 yards. Why do I bring up the Tampa 2 multiple times? 5.5 yards per attempt for Burrow in this game. That's the fourth lowest yards per attempt of his career, meaning on a per game basis. It's the second lowest yards per attempt for Burrow in 2022. I think the lowest was in week 1 against the Steelers, and I think it was below 4 yards per attempt, but I haven't looked at it in a while. Patrick Queen had this sick interception, in the third quarter. There really was a huge momentum shift. The score was and it was a 2-shell look. It wasn't a Tampa 2. At that point, the game was tied at 10. You're going to see that play here in a moment. The game was tied at 10 following a missed deep ball on a 4th down to Tylan Wallace. The Bengals had the ball near midfield, and just a brilliant read and pass drop by Queen. I'm going to mention specific guys because I think it's pretty amazing that the Ravens were so multiple across the 3 games against the Bengals. Defensively, they were so multiple, and so many guys were involved in that. To me, that's illustrative of great teaching and great students, meaning great coaches making adjustments, as you see Queen's interception coming here, and then great students, the players in this case, applying what the coaches, taught them during the week. The Ravens would turn that into a field goal, I think, make it 13-10, make another goal line stand later, before the great drive by Lamar and the offense, and the Justin Tucker closing it out to win 19-17. In my opinion, the foundational element of the Ravens changing the dynamic in 2022 had to be recognizing that you're not going to beat the Bengals 34-31 that often. You may beat them 34-31 once in a season, but that's not the path to beat them with this Ravens team. Keeping things in front, letting the rush guys rush, giving Burrow some extra pre-snap reads to think about, and then look, to be in all honesty, not disrespectful towards the Bengals O-line, but force their O-line to pass pro 8 or 9 times per drive instead of just 3 or 4. If a big play is allowed, they don't need as many plays to score. Make them execute up and down the field. Allow their O-line more opportunities to make a mistake, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Conceptually, it's somewhat similar to how teams have begun to defend Lamar while he was playing in Greg Roman's offense. Now, 2023 is going to be a totally different problem for NFL defenses in terms of dealing with the Ravens offense and Lamar. So that's a topic for another video. Last point about this Week 5 game. Mike McDonald obviously deserves a lot of credit. The entire defensive staff does. I don't want to minimize the coaches, but the players on defense really executed the Tampa 2 coverage expertly from multiple alignments. The Ravens are showing, some type of blitz up the middle here. You can see Marcus Williams is lined up in the box, per se. He ends up, I think, bailing to halves. Patrick Queen, who's lined up at the line of scrimmage, runs the pipe between the hashes. Essentially middle of the field guy. I don't have much room to draw on here, but I think this is Chuck Clark flies over to the other side of the field, essentially getting to a Tampa 2 alignment. That arrow there isn't accurate in terms of where he ends up. Again, I'm running out of screen. My point is multiple guys played this half-field technique on the right. Marcus Williams, Pepe Williams did. Multiple guys ran the pipe in the middle of the field. Josh Bynes did once. I think Malik Harrison did once. Patrick Queen, Marcus Williams was used there. Chuck Clark was generally the high safety to the left-hand side of the field. There were multiple guys who executed these techniques. And while they did that, they were able to slow down or stop the run for the most part while maintaining integrity in coverage. I think there's just a brilliant, maybe I'm not getting to my overall point for it, but being able to execute multiple coverages and the Tampa 2, which the Ravens had not run a lot of under Wink Martindale and didn't run a lot of it in week 1. From weeks 1 through 4. They ran it because the rest of the NFL had shown them the blueprint, the Cowboys, the Steelers, to slow down this Bengals offense in 2022. And the Ravens went out there and, in my opinion, used it at least 12, 14, 15 times. All right. Week 18. Long time between the Week 18 game and the Week 5 game, clearly. Some referred to this as a throwaway game. When I did the edit for this, I did put some of the coverages in the bottom left and sometimes in the top middle. Turned out not to be a throwaway game, in my opinion, for the Ravens defense. The Ravens defense held the Bengals to just 15 first downs on 13 drives. and only 55 rushing yards. Roquan Smith was all over the field that day. Daryl Worley and Chuck Clark were physical as crap against the wide receivers, had some big hits. Burrow threw 42 times, completing 25 for 215 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, the Ravens turned it over 4 times. We don't need to talk about that. That's not the point of this video. I'm talking about the defensive philosophy fitting into a comprehensive overall plan. This, even though we didn't have a great offensive day, clearly, we did generate a lot of yards, I think 364. This defensive plan is in line with week 5. Keep the ball in front, but I thought they showed a lot more man, to be honest with you. Still mixed in plenty of zone, don't get me wrong. There's a couple of split field coverage calls that, I'm not going to attempt to tell you what I think the half field call is. I'm not very good at determining the half field calls. To be honest with you, EA is way better at that. And if you follow any of the following on Twitter, Match Quarters, great stuff. And Jerry Gordon, he's got a fantastic book about it that I plan on ordering here soon before the season. Some of the coverages are labeled, like I said. There may be some inaccuracy in the split field coverages, so I didn't give you any half field calls. Look, through 2 games, I think it has to be pointed out, again, how many guys for the Ravens made plays. I'm not necessarily talking about the guys up front. JPP, Owe, Campbell, Bynes had a sack that you saw in the Week 5 game. I'm talking about the second and third level players. Marcus Peters, tremendously active in Week 5. You don't see him in this film because he didn't play. Daryl Worley played very well. I believe that Burrow was 6 of 11 when targeting Daryl Worley. I'm not a huge fan of those stats. I find some very clear and obvious inaccuracies in some of the ways it's documented, but it gives you an indication that Burrow was a little bit above 50% when targeting Daryl Worley, who made 2 fantastic plays when dealing with Jamar Chase. Thought he played a whale of a game. Kyle Hamilton, Chuck Clark, Pepe Williams, those guys played well. I think you get an example of Pepe playing man down here right now. Marlon Humphrey was just given no help, but still covered well, even I think T. Higgins had some catches against him. As you look at the coverage labels, think about this. It's not just the different coverages the Ravens were giving Joe Burrow. It's from different platforms, different looks pre-snap, and then being able to execute them efficiently, take away Burrow's first and in most cases second read, force him to get to that third read and make that decision in his brain constantly, 30, 32 times a game. Okay, do I need to get rid of this ball? Am I going to get sacked? Can I really trust my offensive line to hold these guys off? I think that really slowed down Burrow during the game. And really, in my opinion, this is a brilliant game plan, being as the Ravens are going to play them the very next week. That's why I don't call it a throwaway game. Given the circumstances, outgunned, no Lamar Jackson, no J.K., no Marcus Peters. I thought the Ravens defense put on a show, but I also thought they planted some seeds in Burrow and the offensive staff's head. Give him a lot of looks, force them to do a lot of study and focus for the wild card game. Now look, in this game, the Bengals did have 10 points through 2 possessions. I think they scored on the 3rd possession as well after a turnover by Anthony Brown. I think the first drive was 17 plays, 63 yards. Second drive, 8 plays, 48 yards, 10-0. But thereafter, Bengals had 8 punts, 1 fumble, 1 turnover on downs, and 1 field goal after those first 3 drives. Burrow was at 5.60 yards per attempt. For his career, which is 42 games, so we're talking about a large sample size, for his career, 7.9 yards per attempt. You got 2 games here. If the Ravens didn't play them again, I would still feel extremely comfortable saying the Ravens have a great platform and a great plan for how to limit Joe Burrow and this passing attack. Conceptually, I'll give it to you. Avoid man-free a whole lot, and I didn't see a ton of cover 3 until parts of the second half of this Week 18 game. You're going to see a lot of it in the wild card game. I used to say, and I still do, that I think when Burrow and Higgins and Chase see cover 3, they like to go up the sideline. Essentially, it turns into a one-on-one. Now, defense coaches tell you it's not really a one-on-one, but as the ball is contested or as someone's trying to attempt to catch the ball up the sideline in cover 3, it is one offensive player against one defensive player. So you can call it one-on-one, and I'm comfortable with that. Ravens didn't use a ton of it, I didn't think, in Week 5 at all. Week 18, I thought I saw maybe 4 or 5 instances of it. You get to the wild card game, conceptually, very different. Now, granted, this is a summary overall of the 3 games. So there's going to be plays, among these 3 games that are not going to fit my narrative. That are not going to fit with what I'm describing to you. So I'm trying to show you the coverages here and let you, pause it and say, hey, coach, I think you're wrong at this time, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought the Ravens conceptually in this wild card game did the inverse of their week 5 strategy. In their week 5 strategy, line up in a whole bunch of different looks, some of them unusual, ones they hadn't shown before. And then from those different looks, which I'll call platforms, springboard into a Tampa 2. Basically, I would describe that as their strategy in week 5. That's an oversimplification, but when 14, 15 of your coverages in that game look like that to me, I'm talking about a large percentage of the coverage snaps that you anticipate being pass plays, turning into a Tampa 2. Ravens generally in this wildcard game did the inverse of it. Now, as I say that, you're seeing a Tampa 2 example come up here. In the wildcard game, line up in a lot of 2-high structure and then play various versions of cover 3. The exact coverage that I just said, I have suspected for a while, is not the one that you want to give Joe Burrow and the Bengals. 2021, I thought there was a lot of examples across multiple games where Joe Burrow and his receivers and his coaches, they just looked at cover 3 as man. It's not man, but they just looked at it as, okay, it's from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. It's going to be one-on-one out there, deep down the sideline. And his guys go get it. Chase goes and gets it. T. Higgins goes and gets it. It's not just throw it up. It's strategic. It's planned. There's some real technique there for those guys. There's reads. The Ravens avoided cover 3, and then later in the year started to use a lot of it, I thought. I even did a video about cover 3 in the offseason here. It surprises me to see how much cover. It surprised me when I was going through looking at Kyle Hamilton and then Marcus Williams' video, how much cover 3 the Ravens actually did show in this wildcard game. I didn't remember it that way. I try to pause the screen for you guys and let you see the cover 3 element of it and how they're getting to it from different platforms. Let this one rewind, and I'll draw up at least 2 or 3 different ones. One thing that the Ravens do, now you see these guys are off because this is 3rd and long, so this isn't the best illustration for me, but they're going to push Patrick Queen out to the flats. Marcus Williams is going to spin down and take the hash. Roquan Smith, the other inside linebacker, plays his more typical coverage on the hash, and then Kyle Hamilton pushes to the flats. Now, really, it's curl flat, but that's me getting a little bit technical. So since they've removed one safety from the 2-high structure, the other safety rolls to middle of the field, and then you get cover 3 with one corner, and then cover 3 with the other. Your typical 4-man rush, 4 under, 3 deep coverage. Another way the Ravens do this sometimes is they'll blitz Patrick Queen, roll Roquan Smith to replace Queen's drop, and then drop Bowser back to replace Roquan Smith's drop. From that platform, what you'll typically see is the safety spin down to the flats, this corner take cover 3, again, this safety take middle of the field, and then this safety take 1/3 of the field deep. I've got a lot of lines there, so forgive me for that. But what you end up getting is just cover 3. 4-man rush, 4 underneath, 3 deep. Ravens show multiple versions of it. They've shown a version where they bring Kyle Hamilton off the edge, drop Chuck Clark down to replace him, roll Marcus Williams back to play the 3rd, and then let these guys play the hook to curl, and then drop an end from the other side. To, again, 4-man rush, 4 underneath, 3 deep defenders. They showed that look, if you ask me, they showed different versions of cover 3 at least 10 times in this game against the Bengals in the wild card. And that's the exact coverage that I thought they were trying to avoid most of the season. When I say most of the season, I mean most of the games against the Bengals. I should have clarified. I thought the Bengals did adjust, don't get me wrong. Going to more quick game concepts, which Joe Burrow's really good at, meaning 3-step, to get the ball out of there so he's not dealing with as many decisions. I'm not saying confused, because that's not what I think. You can say confused if you wish, but the Ravens are attempting to cause some indecision in his or break his process, break his pattern. It kind of, I'm a combat sports person, so it kind of reminds me of like an interrupt jab when a person is trying to move in a particular way in a combat sport, whether it's MMA or boxing, and an interrupt jab interrupts their flow. I think that's what they were trying to do with Burrow. There's probably way better comparisons out there. But look, even though I think the Bengals adjusted and they tried to run the ball some, but they were unsuccessful, Ravens held them to 51 yards rushing on 18 attempts while being multiple. And you see them dropping guys out, rolling safeties down. Here's the one that I was just talking about, where they're blitzing Hamilton off the edge. Blitzing Hamilton off the edge. I think dropping Oweh out to the flat. Rolling Chuck Clark down on the hash. On the hash. Deep third. Deep middle of the field. Deep third. Forgive me for many arrows. If anybody wants to spot me or help me out finding one that's got two different colored arrows, I'd appreciate it. It'd probably make the videos more attractive. But 51 yards rushing, only 234 yards of total offense for the Bengals. You can't sit there and say that Week 18 was a throwaway game for the Bengals when the yards per play and the total yards compared to the drives was very similar. The Ravens had the same impact. Do they stop the Bengals? No. The Bengals still have drives where they, 12, 14 plays, they get a touchdown or they maybe get a couple of field goals. They're very capable. They're incredibly dangerous. That's why I think the Ravens are being multiple. That's why the standard is very high for these guys on defense in terms of asking them to play multiple coverages, play them well, and read and recognize things on the fly, meaning once the ball's been snapped. And at the same time, the Ravens guys are bringing a lot of physicality, and that part is worth mentioning. To me, the fact that the Bengals were able to, that the Ravens were able to be so physical, at the line of scrimmage, D-line, D-tackle, outside linebackers. Be physical with the linebackers taking on blocks. Be physical with the corners and nickel and safeties against wide receivers while executing all those different coverages. To me, it speaks highly of the players and how prepared they were, and the guys that have been brought in, and then also how they've been coached. So you have to give credit to the coaches and the defensive system that's been put in place. I think it's very solid and has the ability to adjust. I think that, and I said this in the Marcus Williams video, if anybody watched it earlier this week, I think I'll put that out Thursday or maybe Wednesday, that early in the season, I thought Mike McDonald and the Ravens defensive staff was a little too edgy, a little too exotic, and maybe a little too focused on pressure and being somewhat similar conceptually to what Wink Martindale did. I thought that after the Bills game in Week 4, we recognized that that's not what we are best at doing. The Week 5 game, I think, was revealing for the Ravens staff because of how well the guys played and covered from a too-high platform and utilizing different looks and adjusting post-snap to cause some indecision or break the quarterback's rhythm, if you will. Look, having Marcus Williams back there is huge. Like I said, I did a film study video on him, so check that out if you want to see examples of his versatility. I thought he was going to be versatile, but having looked at the film again this summer, even more versatile than I had really realized or recognized during the season. The entire second and third level players showed efficiency, if you ask me, across multiple techniques. Coach's ability to adapt, I thought, was incredible, especially occasionally bringing three-man rushes. I thought it counted 4 between the Week 18 game and the wildcard game. I think these 3 games represent a lot of promise for our secondary guys because there's guys being shuffled in and out, meaning Marcus Peters didn't play in Week 18, but he played in Week 5 in the wildcard game. Kyle Hamilton didn't play much in Week 5, but then did play, because you remember Geno Stone replaced Marcus Williams when Marcus Williams went out with a broken wrist, I believe, in terms of more of the reps. But then Kyle Hamilton played a lot in Week 18 in the wildcard game. Marlon Humphrey played in all of them games. Marcus Williams played in all of them games, but he only played the first half, I think, in that Week 5 game. Like I said, I think he played a possession with a broken wrist, apparently. But other guys played a role who are not our starters or our stars. And to me, that speaks to the system that's in place and the ability to coach it and have guys recognize and know what they're supposed to do in an instant. Daryl Worley, Pepe Williams, Geno Stone, I thought surprised a lot of people in 2022, and even in some of the games where he played, not the film that's here, but mind you, because Marcus Williams is back. What do you expect in 2023? I expect the Bengals to try to adjust. Some of the things that I would anticipate them to adjust to, they've already done. Go in 11 personnel and try to run the ball, particularly to the boundary. They did that to some extent. Thought they had a drive in week 5 where they used the run really efficiently and really smart usage of the run to get the ball down the field and score a touchdown. I think it's the drive where they threw a touchdown pass to Hayden Hurst. But in my opinion, the Ravens forced them into that by taking away some of the vertical concepts that Burrow likes to use with Chase and Higgins against man free and cover 3. And the Ravens did play some man free, don't get me wrong. You see, some of these plays labeled here as man free. I think that the Ravens kind of, I do want to say force them into that, but just it's a better tactical decision by the Bengals to utilize the run a little more, or try to at least. It was unsuccessful in Week 18 and then in the wild card playoff game, but the Ravens put them in that corner, in my opinion. I think the Ravens avoided a lot of those situations that we could not avoid in 2021, one-on-ones, even though, T. Higgins had an unbelievable catch in 2021 against double coverage up the left sideline, or up the left hash, I guess, numbers. If you remember, it was on a 3rd and 16. Boyd got wide open and empty. People call it a stick nod, out and up, whatever you want to call it, against Patrick Queen. Pretty poor coverage call against empty anyway. One thing I want to mention, I feel remiss with not breaking down the split field coverages, so I'm going to shout out and point you again to some places where if you're interested in those things, you can maybe find some people that do a better job than me of talking about those things and explain them. EA or Edgar Allen on YouTube has at least 3 or 4 videos done where he's breaking down coverages. I think most of them are split field related, so you got a half field call on both sides. Match Quarters is on Twitter and YouTube, does YouTube shorts, so like 1-minute videos on coverage stuff. It's amazing. He does incredible work, and he's got a really cool website, or I'm not sure if the website's defunct. I think it is, but he's on social media, YouTube, Twitter. Jerry Gordon, a really famous coach, or at least for people like myself who've been a part of coaching forums for 20 years. Jerry Gordon, really cool, classy guy. He's got a book on Amazon about split field coverages. I would highly recommend. I've read portions of it. I haven't bought it yet. I think those guys give you a real comprehensive look at split field coverages that I don't necessarily provide. With the Ravens and Bengals playing in week 2, I wanted to kind of get ahead of this, and then also to be real with you, some of this content I'm putting out in the last month is for me to reshare on social media leading up to certain games. So kind of like acts as a preview a little bit for me, even though this is an extended video, 30 minutes long, is about all I want to do on a Saturday morning. You guys let me know if you enjoy looking at the progression of how the Ravens defended a team, or maybe conversely how a team defended the Ravens. I've considered doing this for how the Bengals have defended the Ravens but 2021 and 2022, because I think that, first of all, I respect the Bengals so much, and I think that those matchups are going to be really balanced again in 2023. I just do. I don't think either team has the ability to blow the other one out, absent some kind of turnovers. And that week 2 game in Cincinnati, Ravens fans should be pointed directly at that. If we're fortunate enough to get a win at home against the Texans in week 1, and that Texan team, I think, is at some point is going to be surging. It may not be in week 1. Very young, new coaching staff. But I do at some point anticipate them to surge and level up. Ravens were able to get a win in week 1 and then go up there in Cincinnati in week 2 and carry over some of this coverage stuff, this efficiency, and masking their true intentions to Joe Burrow. Go in there in Cincinnati and get a win in week 2, you're in excellent shape. to deal with a difficult schedule, in my opinion, in 2023. So my attempt here was to give you guys a comprehensive look at the coverages the Ravens used to slow down, deal with Joe Burrow and the unique skills that his wide receiver core brings. Let me know if you think I did that, if I got to the point, or if I drew this out too long and didn't break down enough plays. I've gotten into editing the plays on the front end and then just commenting occasionally, letting the plays run, letting you guys see them multiple times. I'm looking for feedback. If people enjoy that, great. If not, please let me know. During the season, I may not have time to actually do the editing, because the editing, basically makes it twice as long to get a video accomplished or get a video produced. Appreciate you guys checking in on a Saturday morning and watching a video. Please let me know in the comment section what you think. Maybe I had some of the coverages mislabeled. Feel free to let me know the timestamp. And then if you think other people, other Ravens fans, maybe even Bengals fans would enjoy this video, please consider grabbing a link, sharing it out on social media to help this video get more reach.